Hey folks, so I just got back late last night from Sweden from DreamHack Summer, and I decided I would put together a vlog here the next day. I know Metis just put out one as well, so I thought I would follow suit. And also, it's always been a tradition of mine to typically put out pre-event and post-event vlogs, but it's just I haven't been able to do as much YouTube content lately due to some stuff going on in my personal life that's been really tough to deal with. And so I've really had to focus on that when I've been home. So that's kind of limited what I've been able to do content-wise, but I thought I would do this video. First and foremost, I just wanted to start off with what's most important to me, and was the fact that the event itself was just fantastic. It was my first time doing a DreamHack event on Swedish soil, so that means just like the size and scale and the culture is just like way grander than some of the other DreamHack locations. I mean, the crowd is much bigger. There's so many more people there in the BYOC section. It just has like a different kind of feel to it that's just a little bit like more massive, I guess you could say. And I just had a shit ton of fun at this event, dude. It was so cool just walking around the halls and just seeing how many people were there. They had this like cool culture of, you know, once call will start screaming like "Hello," like, and it's supposed to be like just tradition to wake people up to get back to gaming or something like that. And it'll just pass like through the halls and through the hallways, like in the middle of a game. It'll just happen and it waves throughout the entire hall that the game's taking place at. It was just fantastic. The crowd was fantastic. Everyone I worked with was fantastic. Everyone I met that were fans were awesome. It was just a really cool event. Also, it's always fantastic commentating with Metis. Me and Metis have been working together at several events now this year. I think the chemistry is getting a bit better. I think the balance and flow of the cast is getting a bit better. I think there's still some tweaks that I need to make on my end, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in regards to some of the community critique that came out, which I'll address at the end of the video, or you know, after this part. But yeah, overall, I had a shit ton of fun casting with them as I normally do. I think this is the event where we really got a lot of sick games to commentate together. So yeah, we really were fortunate on that end. You know, like we did the group finals on the day one, so to see who would get first seed out of the group to get straight to the semifinals. The Immortals SK game was just so awesome. Just the storyline of Immortals finally beating SK offline. It's never happened. This rise of this KNG guy and like what he's been able to do. He was just such a beast in this game, and he was really good throughout most of the tournament. He looks like he could be like another guy to keep an eye on, and so that was just like really cool to kind of follow, right? Also cool that we got to do that crazy CLG Fnatic game for first seed out of the group. Holy cow. Went 5 overtime. CLG wins at 31-28. That was a crazy game. I will say at a certain point in the overtime, it did kind of just devolve into both teams turtling up on double opposites on both sides of the map and playing to the last 30 seconds because no one wanted to give up picks. And so it did get a little bit frustrating that like nothing was really happening, especially as a color commentator, when there's just nothing new to analyze, nothing new to break down. Every now and then CLG would like throw in a new tactic to try to play some mind games, and so I was able to kind of talk about that a bit. But for the most part, it was just like really tense, really standstill. But it was tense in a weird way because it was just both teams weren't doing anything like the first part of the round. They were just holding passive angles and no one was giving up picks, and so it kind of just evolved. And that's what happens when you get into that many overtimes. You know, people get the mental fatigue, you know, the structure begins to crack down a bit. You just want to get it over with. It's frustrating. So I can understand it, but it was still a really cool game. It's particularly within regulation. You know, when I went 15-15, that part of the game was really awesome. And it was cool to see like CLG continuing to show you a little bit of something after that Star Ladder performance. And the fact they just fell short in EPL and ECS of getting to the playoffs of those two leagues, but they were right there on the verge. And like guys like Ricky and Kusa have been looking great. Ethan seems to be picking up as well. Finesse doing a great job leading. Cutler starting to pick up his form as a support. So the CLG becomes a more interesting team in North America now because of their group stage performance at this event. And the fact they took a map off of SK in the semifinals later, right? They took Mirage off them nonetheless. Like a super huge map for SK. One of their best maps right now at this lineup. And so that was definitely a bold statement to take that map off of them in a dominant fashion. So really cool storyline when it comes to that as well. Then the second day we did the decider best of threes, which was SK versus Mouse, which we had a 16-14 game on Inferno. You know, basically just, you know, big game there. And then we had them win the second map on Mirage pretty handedly. So 2-0 for SK against Mouse to move on. And then we had Fnatic actually taking on Gambit. Those games were pretty close as well. Inferno actually went into an overtime. And so that was also a really damn good series. Fnatic versus Gambit was probably one of my favorite series of the tournament to commentate. Really cool stuff. And then obviously we commentated the grand finals on the last day, which was also fantastic. It went all 3 maps. The maps weren't really close in score. They were pretty one-sided games. Like, I mean, SK kind of dominated Inferno, the first half was close. It was like 8-7 first half, but then like the second half, they just won 8-1. So they kind of steamrolled it. Fnatic steamrolled SK on Overpass just throughout the entire map. So that was very one-sided. And then the last map, the first half again, like the first map, was very close, 8-7 half, but then the second half was pretty dominant from SK. So we had some halves that were very close, and we got to go all 3 maps. And so overall, it was a pretty good grand final. It was a lot of fun. It's always cool seeing SK versus Fnatic. SK breaks the curse, finally beats Fnatic in the best of 3, gets another title under their belts. Fnatic, still at least their players are starting to look like they're getting into better shape, which is good news for them. You know, they made a final. That's good news for them as well. They beat a pretty powerful Immortals team. They beat a Gambit team that was looking good at previous DreamHack events and CS Summit. So there's a lot positive going on for both these teams when you look at what was going on throughout the tournament for both of them. And it was really fun to cover it. Cool storylines there. It's probably the biggest crowd I've commentated in front of as far as like how many physical people were in the hall at that time, because we filled the whole like seating section, but then there's obviously people in the BYOC section who are just watching from their computers, and they brought in extra chairs on the sides of the crowd so more people come in. Then there's people standing around everywhere in the hall. So there's a lot of people watching this physically from all over the place within the hall, and so that was really cool to have like that climate. And then this is the most viewers I've ever commentated in front of, period, as well. Like I think the most I had done before this event was I casted in front of like 130K at the Civo Gfinity, that best of 5 VP versus Tipo Storm. Actually, the first time being metas commentated together on LAN, one of the first times we did, was the biggest I had done. This one, I think we hit around 185K at maximum concurrent viewers. But uniques will probably be more than that. And so that was really cool in itself as well, to get to cast like a really cool grand final in front of a lot of people. And so it was a really fun event. Some other storylines for teams, I guess, for this is like Cloud9 continuing to have their struggles, trying to see what they're going to be able to do. Gambit, certainly hurt to see them not perform as well when you consider what was going on for them at, you know, DreamHack Austin and CS Summit. I was hoping to see them make like another playoff run here because I think they are a good team, but they ran up against Fnatic and they had some close games there. Hopefully they'll continue to make strides because I do think they're still a team to certainly keep an eye on. I think Adren was just a bit more quiet this tournament than normal, and they were having a little bit of issues here and there. So hopefully they'll get that all sorted out, though. Again, already talked about CLG and Fnatic. And then for the other group of teams, you know, again, Immortals like seem to be doing good with KNG. KNG seems to look sharp. Hopefully they'll keep growing and keep playing well. It was good for them to finally get a game off SK. Not too much to say about Singularity. I know they had just made a roster change, like losing one of their best players right before the event, and didn't know too much about them outside of doing so well at Copenhagen Games and winning there and qualifying for this event, even though they didn't have like the toughest competition to qualify in that EU qualifier. And they had some games that were at least decent at this, right? Like they did challenge SK the first half of Cobblestone in that first map, and they at least like went toe-to-toe with Mouse Sports and put up good numbers. Like the games were very close, so again, just showing you how deep Denmark can be. Like even some of their players and teams that aren't even like maybe considered the top 5 team of their country are still able to like compete pretty well with a team like Mouse Sports, who in their own right has been growing online, and Rops seems to be getting a little bit better and better as each event passes. And so there's certainly still a little bit of something there for Mouse as well. It's just they got beat by the eventual champions. SK at one of those maps was very close. So there's a lot of positive, I guess, you could pull out for each team if you wanted to. And so that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on like the teams, my thoughts on the results, my thoughts on commentating the event. Also, obviously, it's always cool hanging out with everyone, meeting up with everyone that I worked at this event I've worked with before at other DreamHack events or something like that. So there's like a bit of familiarity there, but it's just kind of catching back up, right? Like, don't get to see each other that often. And so when we do, it's always a good time. The green room's always a big hoot. Like we always have a great time joking around and just hanging out and just lounging in the green room and whenever we're not actually casting or in between and breaks and stuff like that. It's always cool hanging out afterwards, getting dinner, getting drinks, what have you. Everyone there super nice, from the talent to the staff, and so it's always cool just to have like that social aspect to the event as well as just like the work. I thought was a shit ton of fun, and I thought went pretty well overall. I did receive, I know that like the popular sentiment on Reddit, at least, like people will say that all was all negative, but I actually received a lot of positive as well. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed the event. It was a blast to get to do a DreamHack in Swedish soil, and it was a blast getting to work with everyone and hang out with everyone and all that good stuff. So here at the end, I will address the critique just a little bit. Again, I feel like it doesn't do much good to respond to it too much. Nothing really positive ever comes of it. No one really changes their mind, I guess, so to speak. But I thought I would touch on it because there was one really big thread that came out after the first map of the second day of the event that did build some traction. And so I did just want to address it really quickly. First and foremost, I want to get it out there that I don't completely disregard or ignore the critique that's out there just because I don't physically respond to it like some people might, or just because I don't respond specifically to your comment, but maybe I respond to something else, does not mean that I'm ignoring anything. I do clearly see all of it, and I don't want you to think that I'm so prideful that I can't accept that some of it's true and that I refuse to make adjustments or tweaks or changes. Like, that is certainly not the case. But the bottom line is that, for one, I do trust my peers more for critique because they work in the industry with me, and so therefore they are more knowledgeable about broadcasting. I also pay a lot more attention to my employers because they're the ones employing me. At the end of the day, those are the people that I also have to make sure that I'm doing right by, and so I focus a lot on what they are telling me, and so that's generally it. And also, I can just get straight up critique from my peers and employers in a way that is much more accessible than me having to wade through a lot of stuff to be able to find good constructive critique from the community itself. Because, yeah, there is some constructive critique out there. There's no doubt about it. And again, I'm not going to ignore it or disregard it by any stretch of the imagination. But you're also fooling yourself if you don't think that I have to wade through a bunch of bullshit to find the constructive criticism. Okay? There are just a bunch of pure insults out there. Are people like bandwagoning? Are people circle jerk hating me based on stuff that I did forever ago that they're still unhappy about, that they're never going to forgive me for, like the Smiths incident, for example? Like, you'd be kidding yourself if you think that every single person who upvoted that thread or commented on that thread actually listened to the broadcast. Like, a lot of the comments on there had nothing to do with the broadcast. They had to do with the Smiths drama. They had to do with the fact that they thought I was annoying, or they had to do with the fact that they don't like the way that I look, or that my voice bothers them, or that, like, they just don't like me or whatever. Like, there's just some pure hate out there that, again, is not really constructive. It's your opinion about me, and it's fair enough. Like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. There's some things I can't change, but there are some things that, again, are valid that I do have to work on. So just put that into perspective. Also, for the voice thing, I think if you compare my voice to YouTube videos I did years ago or commentary I did a few years ago compared to now, I think you will notice I actually have tried to make some strides on, like, my voice and using it better, like having a fuller voice. But still, for some people, it doesn't work for them, or our accent doesn't work for them, or how I pronounce certain words, irks them. And to that degree, it's kind of limited to what I can do. But again, there is some constructive critique out there, mainly about my conciseness and my talking speed. Those are the two biggest things that I picked out from all that was out there that I do think has some validity to them. And they are things I am trying to actively work on and that I am trying to make adjustments in. Like, I can see that. At the same time, though, there, I think, is some hyperbole about how bad it is. Like, some people will say, for instance, that I'm solo casting, I'm talking so much, or that I'm talking 90% of the time, or that, like, those things are also not true. Yeah, certainly there are some things I need to work on talking speed and conciseness. There's no doubt about that. And I think that I did make some adjustments in those areas throughout the event. Like, if you compare when the thread came out, which was after map 1 of day 2, and you compare that to what I did the other 3 maps that day, or what I did during the grand finals, I think you will see I did make some pretty massive tweaks to making sure there was more dead air and making sure I cut my thoughts a bit shorter and things of that nature. Also, to some small degree, the amount that I talk is sometimes caused by external factors that you don't realize are happening, like a technical issue, or the producer's talking to Metis and he has to really focus on what the producer is telling him, and so he can't talk for a while, or someone's passing us a note that has to be read so they can understand what's going on, and so the other person might have to be a bit more long-winded while the other person reads the note. Or Metis is sick this event, so he's having coughing fits, not super often, but they were happening maybe once a map or something like that. And so when that's happening, I have to kind of just keep going, even though I would like to pass to him. There's something happening that's preventing me from doing so. And I'm not saying that is some excuse that excuses all of my long-windedness or something like that, but it does make up some of it, and people just don't realize that stuff's going on sometimes, and so that's the case. Also, I do get some conflicting reports. Like, yeah, sure, there's a huge thread that has some comments that say I'm talking too much or not being concise enough. But then I go to all of my peers. I go to Metis, and I'm like, hey, dude, how do you feel about the flow of the show? How do you feel about the balance of the show? Be brutally honest. Do you feel like I'm, talking too much? Do you feel like I'm cutting you off? Do you feel like I'm interrupting you? And I don't think I ever cut him off or interrupted him, but maybe there were some times that I drug a thought too long and I didn't leave enough dead air in the transition from me to him for the play-by-play or something like that. And I think in general I could just work on my flow and transitions to make them feel more natural and more connected, and as well as have more dead air involved as well. So that's just one thing. But anyway, so I asked him, and for the most part he felt fine with everything. We even went back and listened to a couple of games from the second day after the first map, after I had already made some adjustments, which were like the second, third, and fourth map we did together on day 2, and we felt we were talking about an equal amount. And I also asked production staff, every single person on production at DreamHack, hey, is there any feedback? What do you think about this? Do you think that I need to make these adjustments? What do you think? All of them thought it was mostly fine. I mean, I didn't really get any bad feedback from them at all. They didn't really ask me to make any changes, and those are my employers. And then all my peers that were watching from home, like other talent that were watching from home, I reached out to them on Skype and stuff like that, like, hey, I'm getting a lot of critique in this area. What do you think? Like, is there, because I just trust my peers. Like, they're the people I work with. They're more experts in the broadcast side of things. And so I would be foolish not to reach out to my colleagues and kind of get feedback from them as well. So that should be testament enough that I'm not ignoring what you guys are saying, that I'm literally going out and I'm asking Metis, I'm asking production staff, I'm asking other talent at the event as well as people who aren't at the event, and I'm trying to see what they think or what tweaks I need to make, or if I'm actively seeking out more information, as well as I'm already just making adjustments on my own because I feel there's some validity to what I'm hearing from the community. And you may say that with them, not agreeing, that, oh, well, obviously they're not going to agree. Like, they're your colleagues, they're your friends. There's a positive bias there. And that might be true to some level. But on the other hand, what's also true is they have every incentive, to be brutally honest with me, to make sure the product, the show, is better, particularly Metis, my co-caster, because our performances kind of reflect on each other to some degree. I mean, I think most people do pick it out individually, focus on individual performance quite a lot, but at the end of the day, you're trying to put on the best show possible, and so being brutally honest with one another to make sure that that's happening, that the adjustments that need to be made to make the show better are getting through, especially from your employer. It's their product. You're representing them. Like, they obviously have every incentive to, like, tell you if they feel something's off or something needs to be changed or tweaked or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, there might be some positive bias there, but there's also a lot of incentive to be brutally honest. And I open up with, be brutally honest with me, you're not going to hurt my feelings. And we have that culture amongst us in talent to give constructive feedback, because a pat on the back does us no good. Like, it doesn't do anything to get a pat on the back. Like, we want to hear what we want to work on, what we need to work on. So that's happening. Also, there is a negative bias when it comes to me and Reddit lately. Like, I think that is true. You may say that, no, you're just making that up and you're using that to disregard feedback. No, not at all. But it is true that ever since the Smith incident, any little piece of content that I do gets downvoted to oblivion. People are subscribed to my YouTube channel solely to downvote my video as soon as it gets published. Again, I think that a lot of the upvoting that took place on the one thread, a lot of those people may not have even listened to the broadcast, just saw that it was my name and that I was getting negative attention, and they also don't like me, so they just hopped on, or whatever. Or, maybe it was valid that I was making some mistakes in, like, the first map of day 2 of the event where the thread came out, but then maybe no one actually continues to listen to see if I've actually made any adjustments, or doesn't pay any mind to those adjustments, and just already has, like, this notion in their head of who I am and what I'm doing. And even if I do make changes, they don't really, like, take note of it, or they don't listen to me anymore, so they never even see if I've made those changes or not. Or they have this bias because they already have this notion in their head of who I am, and so therefore nothing I do is really going to make a difference. I think there is some of that going on. And also Reddit, like, even if it gets a few hundred upvotes or a few hundred comments, that's still only a small percentage of the total viewer base as well. So it is kind of like a really small sample size. And that's not me, like, trying to belittle you or something like that, but from a statistics perspective, that is just the case. And that's not to say that all those viewers out there are liking me that aren't posting on Reddit. It's not as if I'm trying to say, oh, well, only a few hundred people out of 180,000 people didn't like my content, and that must mean that the other 179,000 blah 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 numbers all really loved me and thought I was super sick. No, definitely not at all. I think the bulk of people are typically indifferent and are just more focused on the teams playing and how good the game is, and the commentary almost becomes like background noise, or they're just indifferent, or maybe they watch the stream muted so they don't hear the commentary at all, so they have no idea what the commentary sounds like or whatever. I have no idea what the breakdown would actually be, but yeah. The point is that I don't ignore this stuff. Just because I don't physically respond to it all doesn't mean that I don't take it into account. I did make adjustments throughout the event. I will continue to make adjustments going forward. I do admit that my conciseness and talking speed could use work. I think what it really boils down to is that when it comes to talking speed, I just kind of lose track of how fast I'm talking because I'm really naturally excited about the game. I'm just really into the moment, and I'm just not really paying attention to how fast I'm talking. I need to start consciously really doing that throughout the game and really making sure I'm keeping my pacing right on talking speed. Also, sometimes it's just I have a lot of information I want to get out there, and I know the big play is coming up soon. I'm going to need to pass the metas for the action, and I want to try to get it all out, or I need to just maybe find the most important things and get that out and forget some of the other maybe supplementary information that isn't as important. So that's something I still need to work on, obviously. As far as long-windedness, yeah, I need to just focus on being more concise, but yeah, that's just something that comes with time. Again, I don't ever feel like I interrupted him. And again, like, it's not like I ever took big moments away from him. Like, all the big moment highlight clips are all him. Like, my voice isn't in any of those clips. And it's because I've made sure to set him up and to not be a part of it, so to speak. Again, if you ever catch me doing play-by-play, it's probably because I either got caught in an awkward moment, which may or may not be my fault, or maybe there's something going on where Metis can't talk, and so I'm having to like fill more time while he gets sorted or something like that. Another thing was me repeating what Metis had just said, and sometimes that's just for the sake of having a segue where we're both relating on a similar level. Also, you have to understand that sometimes if there's a limited amount of impact things that happen in the round, like maybe only one impact frag happens or one impact moment happens and Metis has already talked about it, then I'm just going to re-emphasize it because it's like really the only thing of value from the round. So let's say 5-on-5 situation, right? Team gets 2 entries. Now it's a 5-on-3. They just win the round off those 2 entries because the other 3 save because they're just way out of position. Well, if Metis ends like, yeah, those 2 entries pretty much seal the deal, as a color commentator, when it comes to me, yep, that's pretty much the main thing to analyze. Like, those 2 entries were the biggest deal. There really wasn't anything else that happened in the round. And so therefore we are going to kind of have a similar thought, or we're going to agree with each other, or we're basically going to cover the exact same thing. That's just kind of how it happens. And that's just one example. But yeah, like I already said, I could work a bit better on the transitions that we have between us. No doubt about it. So that's just kind of what I wanted to get out there. Again, some of the critique, though, is just either completely subjective, like when it comes to my voice or my personality. There's only so much I can do about some of those things. And also some of it is just like shit I'm just not ever going to give any credence to. Like, if you say I have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm absolutely 100% unknowledgeable, everything I say is inaccurate, that's totally hyperbole. Obviously, I'm going to make mistakes. Obviously, I'm not going to get everything right. Obviously, I might just say someone else's name by accident, even though I really meant someone else, or I might get like a number wrong here or there, or what have you. I'm obviously going to make mistakes, but to sit there and say that I have no idea what I'm talking about is like really unfair. I put in a lot of time doing research to make sure I know what I'm talking about, to make sure the things that I say are accurate, particularly when it comes to like results, map pool, and tactics. Like, those are the things I focus on the most, particularly tactics. And I think, like, this is not to toot my own horn and like be some type of narcissist, but I feel like I do typically in a broadcast bring tactical insight to the game as far as what a team likes to do, what a team normally does, what changes that they have made, like what their strengths are on a map, what a player's position is, what they like to do. I try to bring a lot of that tactical insight about a style of a team, if the styles of the 2 teams are similar, if they're really juxtaposed to one another. Like I said, what unique tactics they like to bring to the table, you know, what roles players play, if they change it. Like, did they just change spots recently on T side or CT side? I try to really do that. And also based on that, I try to tell you, oh, they're setting up, it looks like they might be doing this. Like, based on how they're setting up, when they set up like this, it usually means they're going to do this. And a lot of the time I do nail that, but sometimes something happens in the round and they have to make an adjustment. And so maybe I was right and that's what they originally wanted to do, but then something happens and then they do something else. Or maybe I just happened to read it wrong and they were setting up for a fake or whatever. They were trying to make it look like they were setting up for what they normally do, but then they were going to do something else to try to confuse their opponent. And so that means that sometimes I will have like a misread, but I feel like a lot of the time I'm able to like let people know what a team likes to do and what they could maybe expect. And so in that regard, when it comes to people just saying I'm completely unknowledgeable, I mean, again, I can't know everything, and I will make mistakes, but I do think a lot of that is hyperbole. And also, it's not like the people saying that I don't know a lot about the game. They themselves know a shit ton about the game a lot of the time. Again, most of the analysts I talk to, most of the players I talk to, most of the feedback I get from people who are super knowledgeable about the game seem to think that I do well in that regard. But again, it's about how I deliver that information is the biggest thing that I have to work on. I can have all the knowledge in the world, but if I'm not conveying it properly, or I'm not being concise enough or what have you, then even if I have all this sick information, it's either all coming out too fast, or it's all coming out too much at one time, or it's just not being conveyed in a way to you that is consumable. And so that's the biggest thing I feel like I have to work on. Also, I feel like sometimes I rely too much on my research, and I then lose focus on what's actually at hand in the live game. Maybe I'm so focused on my notes and trying to tell you how a team likes to play and trying to bring you that extra analysis or that extra insight that is off camera, like this supplementary information, that I sometimes lose sight on like what's actually happening and like really crafting the narrative of what's happening live in the game. And that's something else I need to think about, almost relying on my notes less, basically, instead of like really trying to bring them in so much into the broadcast. So again, it's not that I'm ignoring critique. It's not that I think you guys are full of shit. Just because I don't respond to it doesn't mean that I don't see it. And I definitely do think some of it's valid. It's just you have to understand that I have to trust my peers more because they're more experts on broadcasting than the community at large. Also, you have to understand that there is some circle jerking going on, some bandwagoning going on, and it is in itself a vocal minority that is on Reddit. And there's a lot of bullshit I have to wade through that's just purely insulting, that's not constructive at all, to be able to find the constructive stuff. And that's why it becomes more efficient to rely on peers for feedback when you don't have to filter through all of this purely insulting stuff to get the feedback that actually is helpful. But again, at the same time, when I say all that, don't take that as me just disregarding everything, because I'm totally not. I'm not using that as some excuse to ignore you guys. It's just that it's a lot harder than you think it is to wade through everything and actually find stuff. And then even if you find stuff that is valid, again, you still just can't please everyone. So just thought I would address that here at the end, and that'll be it. As far as my future goes, not really quite sure yet what's coming up next. Not booked for anything just yet, but hopefully there's some events coming up soon that I might be able to get involved with. Also, we'll try to see if I can't start doing a little bit more YouTube content and maybe even do a little bit of streaming. I'm not really sure. But I guess the future is kind of unclear right now, but I'm just kind of keeping my options open. I'm open for anything. Definitely want to keep grinding. Definitely want to keep working on improving. Definitely want to keep up my strengths while working on my weaknesses, and definitely want to keep doing this because I love it. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Catch you next time.